We are recording. All right, what is going on, boys and girls? I am here with I'll say a fine gentleman. I'll be nice.
Wow, you've never said that before.
I am here with the one, the only DasGeek. Him and I have playful banter back and forth. For as much as it seems like I troll him, I actually really do enjoy his content, and the person behind the camera is actually really cool. And yes, that is a compliment. Do not fall over in your chair.
I don't even know what to do right now. I feel like I'm being interviewed by someone like legitimate or something.
I know, right?
I mean, what happened?
I can be adult at times.
Adult. Okay, that's a good way to put it. What's happening, Dark One?
Not much, man. So for those that don't know what this series is, this is kind of my way of getting to know the people that are more behind the camera. We know a lot about what's presented to the world, but sometimes getting to know just even a little peek. I don't dig too hard or deep. I know a lot of people prefer their privacy, and as they should, which is redundant given the platform. But that's a whole nother story. So. First off, how long have you been on YouTube?
Wow, that's an interesting question. The first question's a hard-hitting one because I really don't know the answer. I would say like between 2 and 3 years, maybe, max. I've been on YouTube. The DasGeek channel's been out there. It was, kind of a project where I thought I could kill two birds with one stone. I can do a little bit of showing people what I'm doing on the side, whether, of course, back then when I first started it was Windows and stuff, but that quickly turned into a lot of security and privacy stuff. And well, we know where that all ended up. But yeah, I think it was probably 3 years ago, maybe now would be my best guess. Someone will have to go out and find the very first video, and they are bad. They're so bad. But I leave them up there despite that because I think it's interesting to see the growth. And I'm sure 2 years from now, I'll look back and go, oh my gosh, those are bad too. So something like that. Not very long. I'm not a veteran by any means.
Trust me, dude. I've been as long as I've been doing videos. Like, yeah, if you look at my content, I got some OG content for YouTube, man. But like, I got a Linux versus Windows video from 2008. Like I've been doing YouTube a long time, but veteran status don't mean crap. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people come and go, but good Linux content has always been rare.
I think it's interesting what people's opinions of what it will be like to run a YouTube channel and then what it actually ends up being. It's a lot of work, and that's why you see a lot of people come and go. It's not as simple as just recording these things. It's, making sure you record everything right. It's dealing with the community and being able to communicate effectively with them, even when you've got a real job and all the other stuff on there. There's just so much that goes into it. And that's why you see so many people come and go, because it's not as easy and simple as it may seem on the onset. Like record a video, upload it, and you're done. Not really how it works.
No, because if you want to be known for your content, you have to actually engage in the community, be it through Telegram, the various forms of social media, whether or not you want to, get into the social commentary about that. That's a whole nother topic, right. Beyond the scope of this. The various social medias, Mastodon, Depora, whatever the hell it is. The Facebook, the Twitters, the YouTube. Yeah,
I do all of them, but the Facebook. I refuse personally to have a Facebook page. But yeah, I technically, from a business standpoint, I should have one. But yes, you definitely need to engage and should be engaging in all of that stuff.
And totally agree. And so, with that said, who's your content actually geared toward? Now, there's a question, because. You had an interesting track because like you just mentioned, you started in Windows. That was your content. That was like your bread and butter content, as far as like, because you said you started with security and privacy and that kind of stuff. Which ironically, Windows 10 is about the worst in that. Besides certain other advertising companies who will remain nameless, that run ISPs and are video service providers.
Right. It's an interesting question. I think the channel has always been geared towards geeks, and that doesn't, the whole thing is, I tell this story. One time I was sitting there talking to a coworker, and they were telling me about their watch, right? And I had zero interest in watches. I could care less about watches at all. Like, I'll go get the Casio with the calculator on it and be perfectly happy. That's about as watch as I care. So, but he was so passionate about it. And then he starts going into the gears and how each one's handcrafted and all that goes into making a watch. And by the time it was done, I wanted one of those watches. I was like, my gosh, this is really cool. So to me, geeking out is not just, for me, of course, it's more technology and computers, but it doesn't have to be. It can be anything that people are passionate about. And that's really what my channel's geared towards. And you can see that in the content. And it's probably a terrible idea from a marketing standpoint, right? Because people either want you to know you as the guy who does hardware reviews, or the guy who does Linux, or the guy who does this. But that's not my life. I go towards the things I'm geeking out at that moment, and the things that I'm doing in my life, and I bring people into it. So if you follow these videos, everything you see is stuff I'm really doing and really engaged in and really using, whether it's setting up projector screens because I want to make a man cave, or it's diving into the latest Linux distribution, or building a new computer, or repairing a computer. These are just real things happening because I surround myself with that, and that's what I'm passionate about. And I love sharing that passion with people because I think it's infectious. And I want people to learn more. Like, I want people to be excited about education again and learning. And I look at an engine and it scares me. People look at a computer and it scares them. That's hard for me to comprehend because I've worked on computers my entire life. But the way I comprehend it is kind of like by looking at a car engine. It's the same thing. It looks all so confusing. The reality is, to a mechanic, it's just parts, right? And so I like to try to break things down, get people passionate about the subject, get people to learn about security and why privacy matters, because there's so much confusion out there, and really just show them all the geekery I'm involved in. But the cool thing happens when you start to grow is you start getting more of those people like the watch guy, right? Other people in your community come around, they get you to geek out about new things that maybe your path wouldn't have led you to before. So ultimately, the channel's named appropriately, DasGeek, because that's really what it's geared towards, is geeks.
And that's the thing. I think people, those of us in the tech field or interested in tech, or in your channel's reference, those of us that like to geek out with tech, software or hardware or whatever, I think we tend to forget that the term geek can really relate to anything that a person's passionate about.
Absolutely.
Because you can geek out for sports, and I'm not a sports guy, trust me, by any stretch of the imagination. Or like you said, you can have somebody geek out about a watch, but like they're passionate about it. So you can, I think, as a person with passionate, things that you're things about, you can understand where they're coming from. Like Absolutely. They have that thing.
Yep. It's infectious. And like I was saying, you said you don't like. Yeah, you said you don't like sports. I'm the same way, but dang it, I sat 40 minutes in a line at a restaurant talking to this elderly man about baseball. I could care less about baseball, but he was so passionate about it and knew all of these games and was telling me the games he went to with his father back in the day and what he saw. And by the time I was done, I was like, maybe I'll go watch a baseball game. Like, that's just how it is infectious. And I want to be that way for technology for people. I want them to come around me and feel that passion about tech and see why it's important. It matters. Because to me, tech is the last free place we have. And it's going away quickly. We're losing it to all kinds of outside influences. And I want to protect that. And I think the best way is to educate people about why it's so important. That's kind of where I come from.
I totally agree. Like you, we're roughly in that same category of, how we grew up. Tech was very free. No, okay, I won't say very free. Tech was more open-ended with what you could not do, etc. Just look at hardware. What do we have nowadays for hardware? That's our hardware.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a sealed box with a screen, and that's what you got. What's on the board is what your tech is. We come from a time where you could upgrade the RAM, the GPU, the CPU.
Yeah.
You had MMX, CPUs on the motherboard and for a workstation, or any of that kind of stuff. You don't get a lot of that stuff anymore. You have to really, really hunt for that stuff, and you really have to want to pay because funny thing is, now for that kind of stuff, you have to pay a premium. Like, there was a premium back in the day, but that was like at the manufacturing level. Now you have to pay the premium for that kind of stuff for just finding it.
Yeah. Yep.
And that to me is a sad state, because if you don't know how something like this works, that's going to be scary at the end to a lot of people, because for as much as this is, cell phones in general are, hate to say it to a lot of notebook users and desktop users, these are computers.
Yeah.
Whether or not we want to admit it. And this is a generation that isn't going to know what a desktop or a laptop is. They might know what like a tablet or cell phone is, though.
Yeah, I hope that that's not the case, but I am in the cell phone industry. I've been in the cell phone industry since I was 17 years old. So I have grown up with it. I've worked on the network side, the care side, the platform side, all sides of telecom. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see the growth and the fact that this device now is as important as your keys when you leave the house. You have to have it on you. You'll turn the car around to go grab your phone back because you can't go an hour or two without the thing. And it's become a very important piece of the business industry. People can get a hold of me at all time. There it goes again. People can get a hold of me at all hours of the day and be able to get me to work on something that's broke or not working at work. And so it's a part of my career. It's part of my personal life. It's a computer in my pocket. It's fascinating. I hope that kids always have the experience of having their own personal computer and the power that can bring. Because even today, as powerful as this little device is, it's limited. It's very, very limited in its capabilities, although that's slowly changing, right? I think I heard the other day that Shark OS may have been completely written from the developer's cell phone. I was reading an article from. So, I mean, who knows what tomorrow will bring with them, and things with Samsung DeX, et cetera, turning your phone into a desktop. You may be very well correct. I think the biggest problem, though, with that theory for me is the kids don't understand that they don't understand, like you said, the software and the architecture behind it, and therefore they don't understand what they're giving up privacy-wise and what they can lose here. The reason kids don't go outside today is because they get harassed all the time. What do all our parents and old people say about this generation? They don't go outside. You know why they don't go outside? Because they get harassed every time they go outside. There's all these rules and laws of where they can hang out, how long they can hang out, what they can do when they're hanging out. I didn't have that when I was a kid. I could go run through the woods and the neighbors would, bring me a glass of water at the end of the day, not shoo me off their land with a gun or something. Like, people are nuts today. So it's safe to be online. But this is our last safe place, and it's going away quickly. And that if I could bring that to people to understand how all this tech works enough for them to understand why this privacy thing isn't about people breaking laws, and that's why it's important in getting away with it. It's important because it's our last free space that we can be ourselves, say what we want, hang out with who we want, and not have to be punished by society for it. That's how I feel.
No, I totally agree where you're going with that. I think if you understand how things work, be it hardware, software, whatever end you want to look at it specifically from, it gives you a better understanding of where you're potentially hitting.
Yep.
Because if you understand the base infrastructure, and you can see the kind of trajectory of where you're going. And that can be really scary sometimes. And I'm not going to lie, I'll be the first to it. I'm 34 and, been seeing a lot of stuff since, our time,
Since AOL, you got mail. Yeah.
Unfortunately, mine was CompuServe.
Okay.
But,
Spring too. Remember that?
yeah,
Yeah.
people who still use Earthlink.
Or Net Zero. That was a game changer, right?
Oh yeah,
That launched the whole Google idea of we'll just display ads and everything will be free. It's cool, right?
everything's a service.
Yeah. Exactly.
Not that we're ragging on Google whatsoever, YouTube.
No, we can't.
Love it. So with that being said, you took an interesting turn about a year into your channel, though.
Yeah.
One that not a lot of people generically do.
No, probably not.
What you're from looking at your content, your most viewed content generically is all your 30 days of Linux challenge stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now that was just a quick view, so I could be wrong on like view count and stuff, but a lot of your views from what I saw was related to that direction where your channel went. What made you do the 30 days of Linux? Because I've seen other people do it and they're like, oh, I tried it for a week and I ran back to X, Y, or Z, and like you actually took a full month and like legit deep dive into that end of the pool.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was trying to find. Well, it kind of slowly cooked me, right? What was happening is Windows 10 was out. I was doing videos around different things, security-wise. And as I was doing those videos, people kept asking more questions. So I had to keep going deeper in the videos to kind of explain them about security and how to stay private on the internet. And the more I kept researching, of course, security and privacy, what's the thing that's going to pop up? Linux, right? And so it's not like I'd never heard of the term, but I knew very little about Linux. And I just realized that when I was downloading it and playing with it one day, that this is not the Linux that I had heard of back in the day in my dad's shop when I think we got like a Red Hat box in and somebody told us to repair the computer. I'm like, what is this terminal thing? I was very familiar with DOS because I grew up building computers with my father and doing software and those type of things. So the command prompt didn't scare me as much as maybe it would scare somebody who knew nothing about that, because I worked in DOS the first part of from 13 up. So that wasn't as scary to me. But what was neat to me is the fact that it was completely free and that every tool that I was basically asking for when I was going through it there was an available free and open source alternative to it. And that was pretty neat. But the 30 days of Linux was really just like, okay, this thing looks really neat. I started subscribing to podcasts and different things, but I didn't know what anybody was talking about, like Linux Action Show and stuff. They were saying all these words, but I was I don't know what desktop GNOME and all these
what Xorg and all this
Nautilus,
other stuff,
the Nemo, and all these things they're talking about. I'm like, I have no idea, but I just absorbed, and I started reading some books and doing some research before 30 days of Linux. So I thought I had a good base for it. Of course, if you go back and watch the videos, you'll realize that I had a very just top level understanding of Linux itself. And I just thought, what everybody was talking about Linux in the security world, what would happen if I took the latest hardware at the time? I had like an i7 6700K and a GeForce 1070, I think. And that was the latest hardware I had, and put Linux on it and tried to completely use it for 30 days without Windows. I made this thing up. There was no 30 days of Linux challenge outside of that. It was just a made up thing. So I went and did it, the 30 days of Linux, and every video I would put out, there would be people coming in saying, hey, you should be doing this instead, or hey, learn the difference between a desktop environment and the OS, and hey, there's this, everybody was helping. And that's where I met a lot of really cool people. And that's really where the community became less of me just popping up videos and getting random people coming to my channel. It became more of community started building around it. And there were really crappy people there too, by the way. And there still are in the Linux community, like any club of people. And I still despise those type of people to this day and do everything I can to make them leave Linux and go back to Windows or something, because I don't want them in the club. But for the most part, it was overwhelmingly positive. It was overwhelming kindness. It was overwhelming patience, and people offline saying, hey, in your next video, you may want to say this instead because you're doing, like, people truly wanted it to work for me. They wanted, and they knew I was not just trying it for, and my plan was actually to go back to Windows when it was done, but they could tell I was taking it serious, I think, and that helped. I wasn't just doing it and definitely going back to Windows. But ultimately, when I started it, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go back to Windows. That's where my Adobe Premiere is. That's where my Office 365 license is. That's where all this stuff is. There's no way I'm going to replace that $500 plus of software in a free and open source world. And yet here I am 2 years later, and Linux hats, Linux in the back, or, you know, Linux boxes, Linux is on my car. Linux is everywhere for me. Look, I just gave Tux Digital a little plug there.
tuxdigital.com/dark dark one, or you're welcome, Michael.
Yeah, so yeah, that's kind of how it started. I mean, there wasn't a lot. I think back on it, and it wasn't. I really didn't expect it to go anywhere. I expected it to be like every other video of that time, getting 13 to 85 views. Like, that's what I was hoping. And then if you look at that series, it's like 33,000 plus people. I mean, and there's so many people to this day still telling me they go back and watch those old videos and they're switching to Linux for them. And that makes me so happy, because I was able to get it. It really impacted people, because I think they saw the sincerity that if this thing sucked, I was going to say it sucked, because there was no reason for me to go back, not to go back to Windows 10 and continue doing what I had spent most of my life making my living on, which was Windows 10, or Windows itself anyway. Yeah.
I think that definitely, like, because that's how I found you to initially start, was through those videos, because anybody who doesn't know why I try to keep these interviews a little more family friendly, shall we say. I usually dig through the back end of YouTube looking for videos to point at and say, these are the people that we don't want making Linux videos. You know, yeah. These are the bad ambassadors that are being presented to the world. And Lord, do we have plenty of them on YouTube. You know, just from stuff being factually wrong, etc. So when I fell onto yours, like, I was like, oh man, this is going to be another one of these. Like, I'm just going to bang my head against the wall. And like, you know, like you mentioned, there's stuff that's wrong, but that's not because of buying into the old, like, oh, it's from the it's 1999 again kind of thing, where it's just like, oh, it's all CLI and all this other stuff. It was not knowing just like certain names, and it was like you were actually legit trying, like, and you weren't like BSing it like I've seen a lot of other people do. Who there are certain people that okay, sorry, I'm name dropping, but it's like people like Timmy Tech TV and like those guys. You know, they'll talk about it and they'll be like, something like he said was, oh, what does he say? My favorite desktop environment is X11.
Wow.
And
that's new.
Exactly. So it was just like, and this is from a guy, you know, it's got 150,000 people following him. And you hear this and you just want to like bang your head against a freaking wall. And it's like, dude, you can't claim to know what you're talking about if you really don't know what you're talking about. But you were showing that you were diving in and actually trying to know what you were talking about. Right. Like that was the key difference. Is that we all make we all have you know, we all say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing sometimes in our content, and you know, that's just what it is. Yeah. But yours just came from a place of like legit trying, and I think that's what a lot of people gravitated to.
It didn't come off as a place of, and I got that feedback a lot too, that a lot of people liked it because I didn't try to come off as I'm an expert in Linux. I knew I wasn't, and the videos didn't attempt to present that. It was just, hey, I'm going to give Linux a try and see if it actually is as good as people say it is. And I think that's the difference. And one I had to learn. I mean, it wasn't really something that I naturally thought of, because in running a small business and things, there's a lot of pressure to act like you're the expert in everything. So that's not a natural place for me necessarily to be in, where I'm the one kind of going to the community like, hey, I'm going to try this thing, but I don't know what I'm doing. It just kind of happened in that case because I knew there was no way to fake it, especially after reading all those books and everything that I tried to do to at least have some general concepts down of Linux before doing those videos, and still got things wrong. At the end of the day, though, the results of it, I think, were that a lot of people migrated to Linux because of it. And because the trolls and those jerks who act like they know what they're talking about, but don't. And the reason I say that very firmly is the smartest people I've ever met in my life, and I've met some amazingly intelligent individuals, all wanted to teach other people. We go back to the geek passion. They wanted to use it to teach and reach other people about what they know. That's a smart person. A smart person is not the troll who goes on there and says, you stupid idiot, it's a desktop environment, not an OS, you moron, I hate you, die. They're not smart. They are, in fact, complete morons. And that's the difference between someone who's truly intelligent and somebody who is internet smart, where they can Google stuff, where they've been around it for a while. But nobody's born with this crap. Nobody's born with the knowledge of what the difference between a desktop environment is and a Linux kernel and all this. You learned it over time, or you learned it from somebody else. So that facade exists heavily in any field where a lot of people are passionate about and they've had to spend a lot of time defending. Linux is one of those fields. Those people still exist, and they need to be rooted out and drove out or retrained to how they talk, because they are literally killing the product. They're the people who keep Linux down by acting the way they do.
It's almost kind of like that end of the, we're both gamers. So, you know, you and I have this weird cross section of, you know, tech, Linux, and gaming. Ironically, is kind of where we both fall into. Because right now somebody's playing a certain Japanese JRPG. Thank you, Proton.
Exactly.
So, and actually, I'm going back through and playing The Last Remnant again right now. Actually, love that game. So,
thank you, by the way, for that one.
Well, what's today? The for those that don't know, Last Remnant is not going to be available after tomorrow, like on all digital distribution platforms. It goes by.
You better get this edited quick. Well, if you need a game like it, Nier Automata is another fantastic one that's not going away. So, and also by Square Enix.
You can play it on Proton. For those that don't know, that is a little thing on Steam that it's called Steam Play. So.
Game changer for Linux.
It is. You know, we have this kind of like weird crossover. You know, anybody who sees me and Ryan banter back and forth, like I come across as trollish, like, but it's sarcasm, and that's the difference. I think, like, I do. I'll be the first to admit I can come across as a giant troll. I will be the first to admit that, unless you actually know the content that I do, like, you know, and you know, you get to know.
But you didn't start off on my channel that way, and that's your way of being like that. To me, is very natural. Your form of trolling is fun, because you didn't do that on my channel when you first came on. You were just encouraging, and then when we got to know each other, we started trolling each other, and that's a difference. Like, you weren't trolling. Like, hey, you stupid moron, it's called a desktop environment. You never did that. You make fun of things that we can make fun of ourselves about. And that is a completely different type of troll, what I'm mentioning there within the community. You know, you want to have fun, you want to joke all.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like, I think, to your point, that people spend so long defending something that they forget where the line is and where just to have fun. Like, like my way of venting my frustration is like when I see stupid videos with incorrect information, like by people who have that facade of content, like they're the expert in it and they know it, is
Right.
to call them out on it. Like, I'll be the first to admit it. Like, anybody who watches like any of my reaction videos to some of the Linux stuff, I swear a lot. I'll be the first
thing. Right.
Though I think EB has me still beat. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Plus, he's got the accent, so his swears have more impact.
Especially when he uses bloody.
Yeah.
God bless you, EB. I love it. So I think it's weird that those people get to that point. It's vitriolic in a way, and it doesn't help.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem I see with it personally.
No, it doesn't help, and frankly, it actually hurts the product at the end of the day, and that's why people like you and other content creators are important to the Linux landscape, because you attempt to make it accessible to everyone, right? And that's what it should be. This isn't some stupid jock club in high school.
No.
Like, this is technology, and there's a reason why this technology is there. Frankly, and I tell this to people, there's a lot of people who are hardcore this and hardcore that for various things in Linux. If there was a better operating system out there, I'd use it, because I'm a geek into tech most of all. That's me. Linux just happens to be the best operating system out there right now, period. If Windows went and created Windows 11 and it's the greatest thing on the planet Earth and all the privacy and security issues are fixed and it does everything I need, I would be on it. But it's not going to happen probably. But that's my point is, I don't use Linux for some, although there are amazing social benefits to Linux, and that has grown on me over time, I don't use Linux because of that. I use Linux, frankly, because it's the best OS. You don't need to defend it anymore. It's the best OS. There's no need to be defensive. It's the best OS, period.
I was going to say, and I think that's the problem with, to put it in the most generic terms, the best aspect and the worst aspects of Linux is the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And that's not to blackball the community or anything, but at the same time, those of us who are a little more, those that should not be vocal are not being vocal enough, because we're letting the zealots, essentially, or the 1%, call it whatever you want, speak for the majority of the 99%, and that's
utilizing weirdos as our platform. That is another issue, and I'm not going to say specifics there because it's your channel, but utilizing weirdos to be people that we look up to in the Linux community is also an issue. There you go. How do you like that for controversial content?
We can go there. I really don't care.
You can cut that out.
I really don't care.
Go on to your next question.
But it's all good. I'll keep it in. I don't care. For those that don't know, just look up for some Linux personalities. You can determine which ones might be the controversial ones.
Yeah, there you go.
If you think I swear, maybe the creator of the Linux kernel swears a little more than I do. Just Google how Linus Torvalds feels about NVIDIA.
Well, I like Linus. Linus is not the issue.
I know that, but they don't. With that said, so you've been on Linux for 2 going on 3 years now. In that process, somehow, as a content creator, you started branching out from the Linux videos into audio production, shall we say.
Yeah. Destination Linux.
So for those that don't know, Destination Linux is a great podcast. So you might want to go subscribe and give it a rating and download it from your various RSS feeds and podcast
Definitely.
apps. And
I'm a little
yes,
biased, but I think it's the greatest Linux podcast out there.
and yes, 100% cheap plug, and I don't care. But no, like, so how did that come about? Because that's a different aspect of content.
Man, that's an interesting. It all happened so quickly. It was Rocco, of course, who started Destination Linux with Rob. Rob ended up leaving at some point for time, personal things, all of that. I don't know. I wasn't around back then. But Rocco wanted to continue it. I had met Rocco on my channel. He had come by, and he was definitely one of the great pioneers of kindness in Linux, and always has been, which I think presents a very passionate and approachable way of doing videos and a way of looking at Linux and the community, and has probably himself brought an untold amount of people into Linux because of that way. So he had come to some of my videos during 30 Days of Linux. He had invited me on Biddle, and I joined that and talked Linux there. And I think he called me out of the blue one day and said, "Hey, do you want to join this podcast, Destination Linux? I need another host." In his words, I remember him saying that and I felt odd, and I still do to this day feel a little bit like an imposter syndrome, because there are people far more knowledgeable than I'll ever be in Linux because they've been in it for so much longer than me. But in his words, I remember him saying, "Your passion is infectious," which is exactly what I wanted to do with my channel, right? I want people to be passionate about hardware. I want them to feel what I feel when I get a computer alive, like Frankenstein, when I turn it on for the first time. So I think that energy and excitement for Linux, you'd have to ask him, but I'm guessing that's what drew him to it. And I remember him using those words, and we were able to talk very easily. Like Rocco and I could sit there in a game and just talk for 3 hours like best friends. And there was never, it just happened naturally. And that's what he wanted at that time for the podcast, was just two people talking about Linux. He didn't want it to be some technical guide. He didn't want it to be just blah, blah, news item and be done. He wanted people to he just wanted to chat about Linux. And so that's how it got started. Of course, Rocco ended up leaving for the same issue Rob did, because like YouTube, podcasts are extraordinarily time consuming. They make YouTube look like it's simple. A podcast, the pre-production, the pre-show, the writing of the show, the community outreach, the emails, the post-production, the editing, the rendering, the uploading, all of this stuff takes an enormous amount of time from everybody, and gave me a whole new respect for podcasting. The equipment you have to have, the costs associated, the web server, it's unbelievable. So obviously, if anything major changes in your life, you've got to give something up. And I think Rocco had to give up the podcasting for now. So now it's me, Michael, and Zeb. And, I think it's working in this format. We're keeping the very foundation of Destination Linux there. And then we're just adding kind of our own flair to it. But yeah, Destination Linux is a super important podcast, I think. And the reason why I dedicate so much of that time I don't have is because it is another way of getting Linux out with a very approachable front. And anybody, no matter what your skill level is within Linux, could listen to Destination Linux and enjoy the content.
Definitely agree. I think the approachability, because obviously I am in the Telegram group, and I'm very involved on that end of things, like community-wise. So I've seen over the course of time where DL has gone, as far as growth, and the way it approaches community is different. It is not the same as a lot of other online communities.
Right.
Everybody is welcome. You mentioned you did, skill level. Mm-hmm. You have, and this is, yes, I'm going to compliment you
Again?
So,
Oh my gosh! Somebody
yeah, I
write this
know.
down. You get a calendar.
Well, you don't need to write it down because it's going to be on video.
You're gonna cut this part out, right? The compliment part.
Potentially. But no, like the approachability, and the thing is, it is not the length of time that determines what you know in Linux. It is it is the passion and the willingness to learn that really determines where you are. Okay, you've been in this 2 years,
Right.
essentially.
Yep.
There are not a lot of people running around doing i3.
Or Gen 2
or Gen 2, or in your case currently, if I'm not mistaken anyway, Fedora.
Yeah, lots of Fedora.
Like there, most people would be like, I'm going to stick with Ubuntu.
Yeah. Lots of Linode and DigitalOcean servers. I love dropping those things. That's like one of my favorite things to do.
So I think sometimes you sell yourself short by the fact, I've only been in this for like 2 years. I don't think the amount of time determines where you stand, like on a technical level when it comes to Linux.
It's fair.
You have the base foundation and then some. You know more about Linux than people who supposedly, like Timmy from Tech TV, than people who are quote unquote authorities on tech.
I appreciate that. I try, and the thing I think is neat about Linux is that you can constantly learn something. It reminds me of, like, I've interviewed a lot of people in my life for jobs, and some of the jobs were at the point where Excel was an important product to understand, to know, right? And then when you ask somebody, what's your level of expertise in Excel? And they're like, I'm expert level. And I'd always laugh because there's no such thing, because Excel has Visual Basic plugins. You could be great at formulas. You could be good at charting. You could be good at and Linux is the same way. It's an endless, and even 1,000 times more so, it's an endless adventure of knowledge. You just decide what you want to learn today in Linux, and it's there. And as somebody who's constantly wanting to learn new things, Linux is an amazing thing to get involved in, because you will always feel like you're an amateur in Linux.
No, definitely. I think that is the greatest thing, though, because the one thing I think people tend to forget that once you think you stopped being able to learn something, that you're an expert. No, what makes you an expert is the fact that you know that you will never stop learning.
Yep.
Because you'll have areas of experience that make you knowledgeable. But the fact that knowledge is always going to need to grow, especially in tech, because this industry changes so much in the course of a year. 20 years ago, would we be thinking about where we're at now?
Right.
Heck no. Like, I remember when we used to have the webcams from 20 years ago that were literally like watching like old school, like CCTV, where it was like one clip every 3 seconds over dial up, it is old school. And I think we are going in a direction, and 20 years ago, I don't think you could have said, oh, this is where we're going. Like, nah, you wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so with DL though, you have mentioned community a few times. Overall, as you mentioned, you had a few problems.
Sure.
What do you think, like, those that are the happy, content users, shall we say, the ones that are, enjoy using Linux and not necessarily run to the hills and scream about it, that's what content creators are for.
Right.
What do you think they can do more of to mitigate the effects of the hyperbolic, and I'm not going to use toxic, but the hyperbolic and the ones that are speaking louder than they should be. The ones that are causing the problems. Because
the community is
I was going to say.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, because Linux really does have a really bad PR problem when it comes to that.
It does, but really, there's a lot. Anytime you're in like a club, there's bad people that show up, right? They're disturbed individuals will show up into clubs, especially when the club is free and open to anybody to join. So I think you're going to have it no matter what. I think the important thing is for people to attempt to call those individuals out for that behavior. So if you are not somebody who's going to be a content creator, and believe me, I would understand your reason for not wanting to be and screaming from Linux at the top of your lungs, then making sure when you're going on forums and things like that, that you are, stopping the trolls and behavior and calling it out for what it is. Or instead of somebody who says, I don't know, RTFM, you go on there and actually provide the answer to them to basically minimize the troll. Because if the trolls had gotten to me first, then I wouldn't have stayed with Linux, even being that it is a better product, I think, overall than most of the operating systems that we're used to using today. I probably may have ended up maybe in Mac OS or something like that. Because why would I want to put up with a community of people who are mean, rude, and just plain stupid to social norms? So I think, and thankfully, the overwhelming amount of people are kind. And you see that in the Destination Linux Telegram group. We will ban or kick somebody or pull them to a side in a heartbeat constantly as moderators and admins of that channel to keep it a peaceful place that it is today. You can go in there and be the very first time you've ever joined a Telegram group and you're still in Windows, and people will talk to you kindly and nicely, and there's none of that meanness. And when it does happen, we come down on it hard because we don't want that to be the community that Destination Linux is. It's the same thing in my community now, although it's much easier once you start getting into where, you've got a community, because now it doesn't even take me, I can't even respond to a troll before my community eats them alive. So it's a really nice situation to be in as a content creator now, but I still try to go out there on Reddit and things. And if I see somebody being rude about Linux, I will provide the person a question. I will PM them and tell them, hey, if you need any help, come reach out to me. And just generally be a good steward for the product, because the community part is the important piece. I mean, that is what makes Linux so special. Is it's, as Noah says, it's not just the OS. You get to be a part of this community too, this club. And it's a pretty cool club to be a part of. The people are really ridiculously knowledgeable. You get people from all walks of life in every single industry they work in, whether they're server admins, some just work regular day-to-day jobs, some work in, factories, and you get every walk of life, young, old, in between, everything is there. And that is a really cool community to be a part of, because you get to learn from everybody's experience, and it's worldwide. It's just absolutely worldwide. So now I get to meet these people from all around the world and learn from them. You really can't come up with many communities, I can't anyways, off the top of my head, that have that type of foundation. And that is what makes Linux. So we don't want to ruin that by allowing people like the trolls and things and the weirdos to exist, to be or be who we consider to be our heroes, or just because they're knowledgeable in the matter, the way that they act or react to situations could make them worthless to the product, the overall good of Linux.
Definitely agree. And I think as someone who's been in Linux for way too long, at least as a community member, not always as a technical deep dive end of things like, right, people like Michael or whatever. Generic end user. I don't even go to say I'm a power user, because I'm to the point now where if it don't work the first time, I'll move on. Right. But it definitely is something that I think that having that place where you can have disagreements,
Sure. Yeah.
but it's still like, you know, like in the DL channel, or, you know, even on some of the videos that I've done with you in the past, you know,
Yeah.
there have been people who have made recommendations in a very unpolite ways. So sometimes it requires a similar response back.
Yeah.
But
Check them. You got to check them.
I don't know what you're inferring, Ryan. But I think you have to, it takes a mix of both. Like you have, the problem is, I don't think you have like these two sides of the community. You have like the pragmatist side and the philosophical side. And like you have some of us kind of in the middle who are like, oh, we love open source, or FOSS or FOSS or whatever you want to call it. And, you know, that's our preferred end of things. Like, you know, why wouldn't you? But on the same note, we're also pragmatists who are like, it's a tool. We want to get stuff done.
I got to get my job done. Right. Yeah.
And I think those people usually feel like they're kind of stuck in the middle, because the Linux end, you have the extreme pragmatists who are like the business end of things, and you have the extreme philosophical side of things. And you get like the centrist kind of people are just kind of like, you're let the other two go at it. I don't care. And I think those people tend to need to get a little more involved. And when they do, it helps shut down the negativity that both extreme sides bring. Because you got one that's worried about money, and you got the other that's worried about the development side of things and how it's done, and et cetera. So I think that is a very fair point, though, that you make, that we need to look at who and how we present the community, and who we let represent the community.
I mean, there should be no single person who's important enough to basically keep putting on a pedestal despite what they may be doing or saying or presenting, and no matter what they may have contributed to Linux or open source in the past. And I think I know you can read between the lines on that, but I think a lot of people need to think about that even if, let's say I go wacko next month and, you know, start becoming some weirdo government conspirators that just starts going crazy on everything has to be this way or that way, or, you know, I hate you and blah, 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 then kick me out of the Linux community because I deserve it. Because no single person is important enough for this product, because this product does represent, you know, on both sides of it, I see their points, right? Free and open source does create some amazing things. Like there are projects right now to get cell phones and computers into the hands of people in areas where they don't have access to them outside of a library. Think about doing your homework when you're a kid today and you don't have access to a computer, how much that's going to hurt you. The same thing happens with software, right? Imagine a kid who could be the next Linus Torvalds creating the very next version of an amazing kernel, and he doesn't have access to a computer though. And so, you know, or he can't afford the software or an IDE platform to be able to write that software. These things are important problems, and they're bridges to economic divides and all of these things. So I get it, and I believe in it, and I'm passionate about it. At the same time, I also need to get work done. And if the better solution, the faster solution for me is to use a proprietary piece of software, that's what I'm going to do. Again, Linux is, I don't personally use Linux because it's just free and open source software. I use it because it's the best. It's the best operating system, the best kernel to the operating systems out there, period. That's how I feel. That's why I use it. I don't think it has to be defended on that. But yeah, absolutely. The middle is generally where the answer is to most issues, not on the extreme left or right.
In shock and surprise. But so with that, I want to try to kind of bring this back to specifically being a Linux YouTuber, though. What, and this will probably be either my last or second to last question. What has been the biggest experience that of learning experience specifically as it relates to Linux content on YouTube, though?
When you say biggest learning experience, you mean what took me the longest to learn within Linux, or
just in general, like being a content creator that's specific kind of, I don't want to say you focus on Linux because you're all over your tech and, but when it comes to your Linux content, what has been the biggest learning experience when it comes to making or dealing with the Linux content creation, be it, from actually making the content, recording it, video editing, whatever, pushing out, tagging, whatever. Like, what would you say is the biggest thing that it took you to learn to do as a YouTuber that focuses kind of on Linux content, though?
That's an interesting question. I think the thing I have the most issues with still to this day is audio. And that took me the longest, and frankly, haven't solved it within Linux. But creating content in Linux, the hardest thing for me is audio, because I've spent a fortune on audio equipment.
All Rocco's fault.
El Rocco's fault. And I still to this day have issues with Pulse Audio and things. Now you can use Jack, of course, and Jack was a big learning experience for me that Scrapjaw happened to help overcome, and that's helped a lot when I'm not distro hopping and remember to install it. But otherwise, essentially, audio's probably been the biggest hurdle because, and I understand it used to be way worse before Pulse Audio, but today, still to this day, I think that there, for instance, if you go get a certain Behringer DACs or USB interfaces and things like that, you are going to have hardware compatibility issues that will require you to install Jack, which Jack installation and setup is not user-friendly at all. And it would be very hard for me. And in fact, I believe when we had the creator of Elementary on OS, he does audio production. I believe it was him, and he uses his Mac still. So that's not to say you can't be an expert audio creator in Linux. Scrapjaw is an example of somebody who does. You just have to completely sit there and invest in understanding all the underlying architectures and how all this works versus plug and go. And so I think today, still the hardest thing, the most difficult thing, the thing I struggle with the most in Linux is audio.
Ironically, I made a video with the 5 pain points of Linux, I believe, at one point. The sound subset system was still one of them. Not gonna lie, it's gotten a lot better over the years. Like you mentioned, I remember when Pulse Audio came out in Ubuntu 8.04, and it was broken. Like, it was beyond broken. You were literally trying to figure out how to rip out Pulse Audio just so you could have ALSA, or I believe it's OSS, as your only two options, and that was all you wanted. Like, right. That's how bad it is. So I commend the work that goes into Pulse Audio. That is not a fun project by any means, trying to get that to work. And the creator's done a
But I have come closer
to
diagnosing what it is, and I do want to be part of the solution. So, I don't believe in telling everybody, well, if it's a problem, you go fix it, because not everybody has that time. No. But in this case, I actually do want to fix it for my specific issues. So I have a Focusrite. If I open OBS right now, because I'm recording in Zoom, what's going to happen is my audio is going through the Focusrite into these headphones. The Focusrite is going into DBX286S mic preamp processor and coming out this Rode Procaster mic, right? So as soon as I open OBS, it attempts to grab grab another audio channel, I think, and I will hear this static. You'll become high pitched and everything else, but to you, you'll hear me normally. Everything from your side will be fine, but I'll be hearing all this distortion because for whatever reason, when another program attempts to grab that audio channel, instead of sharing it with the Scarlett, because it's both in my input and output interface, it creates that issue. So I can go basically kill Pulse Audio and reset it, and it will come back to normal for a little while until I open another program that grabs audio. If there are two programs or more that grab audio, it's going to happen, and then I have to kill it, and then it'll come back, and it will be perfect like it is now. So there's got to be a way to fix it. Now I have to get in and figure out how. So there you go. I do want to be part of the solution too. And that's the neat thing about Linux, I think, is it also gets you into wanting to start to contribute in some way.
Now, speaking of so we'll end it on this. With Linux, and we talked about a lot about community and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What way can the general Linux user, like I'm talking just mom and pop, whatever, how can they go about contributing to make the community A, better, and B, projects better? Or in our case, when we talk projects, we mean the underlying stack, the kernel, desktop, whatever, or programs.
Well, I'm going to say something that I'm starting to learn here, and that is because I've not been perfect in this arena at all, but it's something that I'm attempting to change a little bit. It's okay to, first of all, in helping out, it's one thing to be like, I don't like this feature. Let's use GNOME for an instance. It's one thing to say, I don't like this feature, right? Or I don't like that they're doing this. It's another thing, because that's a fair feedback and that's helping. You could go on the forums and say, hey, this decision you guys made is going to impact me this way. I don't like it. It's going to hurt, blah, 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 blah. It's a total nother thing to do what happens in the Linux community where they want something to beat up on so bad. They pick that thing and then everybody just kicks it to death till it goes away. And then once it goes away, Unity, everyone suddenly comes back and says, God, I miss Unity. It was so amazing and great, and I wish they'd bring Unity back. Everybody, when I joined Linux 2 years ago, everybody was kicking it to death. Oh my God, don't use Unity. It's the worst thing on the planet. Unity is horrible. Unity is this. And then Unity went away, and it became GNOME. And what did people do? Oh my gosh, I hate GNOME. It's the worst thing in the world, and blah, 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 blah. And believe me, I've been there. I'm not a huge fan of GNOME's workflow, although I love it in Fedora, which is weird. It's more vanilla. I love it in Fedora. Don't like it anywhere else. But I think we have to be very careful about beating things to death without offering solutions. It's just like work. When you go to work, your boss doesn't want you complaining about everything. If you're going to complain about it, come to me with a solution. And I think the same thing has to happen to the community. And then the second thing that I'm also personally working on a lot, and it's been hard because I'm one of those people who, okay, this is broke, I'm just going to move on. Open bug reports. Every developer we've ever had on Destination Linux that we've interviewed, please open bug reports. Please open bug reports. Now, I've opened a lot recently, and not all of them get fixed. Not all of them are a response that I want. But at least I know I've brought the issue out, right? And now it's up to them to fix. And then try to find a way to find something within Linux you're passionate about that you can contribute to. That could be writing manuals, translations if you know multiple languages, helping somebody with their website, graphic art, that type of thing. The Linux community is endless with its talent. I think sometimes people, including myself, will feel like our talents aren't good enough to contribute to Linux. And that's really not the case. My little installer script I have on GitHub, people to this day are new Linux users and things using that to get their systems started up because it's easier to them than to navigating through software stores and all of that stuff. It's simple. It's silly. It was a bunch of stolen code from other places that I threw together to make for myself, but it's helped some people, and that's pretty cool. That type of stuff, I think, get involved in it because that's what the whole idea is that we're all jumping in this. And then when you can, kill the trolls. I mean, don't kill them, but check them.
And I want to add one more thing onto that. If you feel like you can't contribute in those type of ways, there is one other way to contribute. And it's something that I think there's a stigma around.
Subscribe to Dark One.
No, well, do that too, but I'll do that at the end. And that's actually contribute financially.
Yeah.
There are a lot of projects now that do pay. I know it's a proprietary app, back end, whatever. Use LibrePay, don't care. You can financially contribute to projects. Because if you feel like you can't contribute with, if you're just an end user who you don't think, you can contribute to manuals, which Ryan won't read anyway.
It's true.
Or various other ways, projects always need financing because they can bring in somebody who, with that financing, that might be able to do that portion of the project that you want improved upon. There's bug bounty programs. There are so many ways that you can contribute. And yes, unfortunately, as much as the open source community wants to be like the peacenik, friggin' beatniks from back in the 60s, all love and free and all that crap. At the end of the day, the world revolves around money. You're going to hate to break it to you. Everybody, you're going to pay in two different ways in open source. It's either money or time. Mm-hmm. Which one do you value?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And having interviewed all of these developers, one of the interesting things is, tell us about your day as a developer question when they say, I go to work all day, then I come home, and then I work on my distribution, or I work on this piece of software. They also have families, by the way. So they're taking time away from their families. They're very tired, like all of us, when we come home from our real jobs. And they're still building all of this for nothing. Contributing is definitely something you should do no matter what, and especially if you make money off of it. You're doing art design, music production, YouTube videos, and you're making money. You should absolutely be taking that money and contributing it to the projects that have allowed you to be able to do that. So that's my take on it.
Very much agree. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call this interview a wrap. DasGeek, always appreciate it for as much flack as I always give you. It's always fun, man.
Dude, I love you, and we're going to play some games. Well, maybe not today, but by the time people see this, but we're going to play some games together. We always do. And I love what you do for the community. I love your brutal honesty. I love what you bring. So keep doing what you're doing, and keep giving me all kinds of flack, okay?
As long as it's not reading on the manual portion, though. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call this interview a wrap. You guys know what to do. Rate it, subscribe. Peace out.
See ya.